Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take the source material you send us, really get into it, and pull out the key insights.
That's plan.
Last time, we really dug into 1066, the Norman Conquest. Not just the battle, but how William the Conqueror and his followers basically made Norman French the language of power in England.
Yeah, it was a massive shift, not just a new king, but a whole new linguistic layer at the very top. For, well, centuries, really. If you were important in England court, government, law, even higher education French was, the language to use.
And Latin still held its place too, right? For the church.
Oh, absolutely. Latin was crucial for religious matters,
Yeah.
scholarly work, and English. Well, English got pushed down. It became the language of the common people, especially out in the countryside where Norman influence maybe wasn't quite so direct, so immediate.
And the sources really drive home that this wasn't just practical, it was about perception. French
Mhm.
was seen as what, sophisticated, noble?
Exactly. Noble, refined, the language of serious business. And English, well, the perception was it was crude, basic, the language of peasants, not really fit for running a country or writing poetry.
So there was a real danger then that written English might just fade out.
A very real danger. I mean, if all the official documents, the literature, the records are being kept in French or Latin, English survives mostly as a spoken tongue. It's the language of home, the fields, the villages, but not the halls of power or the universities.
But obviously, spoiler alert, it didn't fade away. In fact, it staged this incredible comeback. And that's what we're focusing on today, using the sources you sent in. What were the key moments, the specific historical events that let English climb back up? How did it reclaim its place after being sidelined for so long?
Right, that's the mission. Where did the tide start to turn?
Okay, so let's dive in. We know 1066 was the big moment for French taking over. But was there any French influence before that?
There was, yeah. The sources mentioned some earlier contact. Trade, diplomacy, even royal marriages between England and Normandy before the conquest. So some French words did creep in early on.
Like what sort of words?
Well, the classic example is castle, starting to replace the Old English word burg. It represents a new type of fortification, a Norman thing, and the word came with it. Though burg stuck around too, meaning like a fortified town.
So a bit of linguistic mixing even before the full takeover?
A little bit, yes. And then for a long time after 1066, the Norman rulers stayed very connected to France. The sources point out English kings often spent loads of time over there, ruling their lands in Normandy and elsewhere.
Right, they were Dukes of Normandy and Kings of England.
Exactly. So that constant back and forth reinforced French usage among the elite in England. It was their mother tongue, the language of their original power base.
Makes sense. Kept the connection strong. So when did that link start to fray?
A really key date, the source's flag, is 1204. That's when King John of England lost control of Normandy to the French king.
Ah, okay. That sounds significant.
It was huge, because suddenly the Anglo-Norman aristocracy, the lords who had lands in both England and Normandy, they had to choose. Their main land holdings were now in England. That direct geographical tie back to Normandy was cut for most of them.
So they became more English, by default almost.
Increasingly so, yes. Over that 13th century, the connection weakened. The aristocracy in England, still speaking French among themselves, were living in a country surrounded by English speakers. They couldn't just ignore it.
They needed English for day-to-day life.
Pretty much. To manage their estates, talk to their tenants, deal with local officials, even fight local legal cases sometimes. They started having to be bilingual. French for the high-level stuff, court and government, but English for practical local matters.
Necessity driving language use again.
It really is. And interestingly, the sources say this period, the 13th century, sees a second big wave of French words coming into English. Maybe even bigger than the first.
How come? If they were becoming more English.
Because as this bilingual ruling class started using English more often, and for more things, they naturally pulled in words from French, the language they already had the vocabulary in for complex topics.
Ah, so if they needed to talk about law in English, but they only knew the French legal terms.
They just used the French terms.
Mm.
And it wasn't just the old Norman French anymore. Contact with mainland France, especially the influential Paris dialect, was also changing the kind of French spoken in England. So the loanwords become even more varied.
So they're borrowing words for government, law, culture.
Exactly. All those areas where French had been the dominant language. Words related to justice, administration, military stuff, food, fashion, the arts. This mixing is creating what we now call Middle English. It's English, but it's absorbing masses of French vocabulary.
But it hadn't fully regained its status yet, right? It was changing, but still not the top language.
Not quite yet. For that final push, that reclaiming of official status, the sources point to two really major game-changing events. Catalysts, you might say.
Okay, the big turning points. What's number one?
The Hundred Years' War. Kicked off in 1337, dragged on all the way to 1453.
Wow, over a century of fighting between England and France. That's bound to stir up some feelings.
Oh, massively. It had tangled roots, English kings claiming the French throne, arguments over territories England still held in France like Aquitaine, economic competition, especially over wool trade with Flanders. It was this long, bitter conflict.
And I bet fighting France for generations made being French or even speaking French suddenly seem, well, a bit suspect in England.
You hit the nail on the head. The sources really emphasize this. The war forged a much stronger sense of English national identity. People started thinking of themselves as English first and foremost in opposition to the French. And speaking French, the language of the enemy, started to seem unfashionable, maybe even unpatriotic among the English nobles.
So it wasn't just a passive drift away from French, it was more active, a conscious turning towards English.
It looks like it. There was a definite anti-French sentiment growing, and the sources show this reflected in actual policy changes, moments where English makes a deliberate comeback in official life.
Like what?
Well, get this. In 1337, the very year the war started, King Edward III apparently addressed Parliament in English. It was a first. Hugely symbolic.
Addressing Parliament in English, that sends a message.
It really does. Then, a bit later, in 1362, there's the Statute of Pleading. This law basically mandated that all court cases in England had to be pleaded, argued, and judged in English.
Why? What was the reasoning?
The statute itself says it's because French was much unknown in the said realm, and people didn't understand what was being said in court, which hindered justice. So a practical reason, but the timing right in the middle of the war is hard to ignore.
So justice needs to be in the language people actually speak. Makes sense.
Exactly, though they often still kept the written records in Latin, or sometimes French for a while longer. But the spoken language of the law courts shifted to English. And then, jump forward to 1489, not long after the war finally ended.
What happened then?
English officially became the language used in Parliament itself, replacing French entirely in that domain too.
Wow. Okay, 1337, 1362, 1489, those dates falling right within or just after that long war against France. It really paints the picture, doesn't it? The war providing the push, the nationalistic reason to elevate English.
It definitely seems to have provided the political will and the patriotic motivation. But there was another huge event happening around the same time, something utterly devastating, that the sources argue created the crucial opportunity for English speakers.
Let me guess. The Black Death.
That's the one, the plague. It hits England around 1348, right in the early decades of the Hundred Years' War.
And the scale of it was just unimaginable. The sources talk about maybe 40% of the population dying in Britain and Ireland, maybe more?
Horrific numbers, a demographic catastrophe. And here's the crucial point for language, according to the sources. The plague didn't hit everyone equally. It tended to spread faster and be deadlier in more densely populated places.
Like towns, monasteries.
Exactly. Monasteries, universities, busy towns, wealthy households with lots of staff, and who tended to be concentrated in those places.
The clergy, the scholars, the administrators, the merchants.
Yeah.
The people more likely to be fluent in Latin and French.
Precisely. The very institutions and social groups where French and Latin were most strongly entrenched were disproportionately affected. The plague caused this sudden massive shortage of precisely those people, the priests, the monks, the teachers, the lawyers, the government clerks, the skilled artisans who often operated in more urban French-influenced circles.
So the linguistic establishment, you could say, took a massive hit.
A devastating hit. The old elite and the people who served them using French and Latin were decimated.
And what was the effect on the survivors, particularly the common folk?
Well, think about it. Suddenly there's a massive labor shortage. Landowners need people to work the fields. Towns need officials. Monasteries need staff. The value of ordinary labor skyrockets.
And the ordinary laborers mostly spoke
English. Overwhelmingly English. So their economic power and social importance increased dramatically, almost overnight.
So it's like The language of the working class suddenly became much more essential because they were the ones left to keep things running.
That's a huge part of it. As
Yeah.
the French and Latin speakers in positions of power died off, English speakers were needed to fill the gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a manor needs a new reeve or a guild needs a new clerk. If the only qualified people available speak English, then English starts getting used in those roles, in those contexts, out of sheer necessity.
So the plague didn't just kill people, it fundamentally reshuffled society, and in doing so, boosted the status and necessity of English.
That's what the sources strongly suggest. The social upheaval was immense. It broke down old structures and accelerated the rise of English by reducing the number of French-Latin speakers in key roles and simultaneously empowering the English-speaking majority.
It's striking how these two massive crises work together. The Hundred Years' War creates the desire to ditch French for patriotic reasons.
Right, the nationalistic push.
And the Black Death creates the opportunity and the necessity by changing the social maths and empowering English speakers.
That's a great way to put it, drawing on the sources. They acted almost in tandem. The war provides the why, the patriotic motivation. The plague provides the how, the demographic and social opening. Together, they accelerated the decline of French prestige and propelled English forward much faster than might have happened otherwise.
But as we said, the English that emerged wasn't the same as the English spoken before 1066, right? The sources emphasize how much French had already changed it.
Oh, completely. It wasn't a return to Old English. Those centuries of French dominance left a permanent mark. English absorbed thousands upon thousands of French words. The sources make that very clear.
And this borrowing actually made English richer, didn't it?
Absolutely. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It hugely expanded English vocabulary, especially in areas where the Norman French elite had held sway.
Can you give us some of those examples again? The food ones are always so vivid.
They really illustrate the point well. You have the animals in the field, tended by the English-speaking peasants. Ox, sheep, swine, calf, Old English words. But the meat served at the Lord's table. Beef, mutton, pork, veal, French words.
The language literally reflects who raised the animal versus who ate the fancy cut.
Exactly. And you see it everywhere. Government and law. Think government, parliament, majesty, treaty, judge, jury, verdict, evidence, justice, crime. All French origins.
Military, too.
Definitely. Army, navy, battle, soldier, officer, captain, siege. Areas the Normans specialized in. And culture. Fashion, art, music, dance, beauty, banquet, dinner, supper. The list just goes on and on.
So English came back, but it came back transformed, loaded with this new vocabulary.
Precisely. This is the language we call Middle English. It had lost a lot of the complex grammar of Old English, simplifying in some ways, but it gained this incredible lexical richness from French. It became arguably a more flexible, expressive language, paving the way for the English we use today. The comeback wasn't just about status. The language itself was reborn.
Which brings us to a really interesting thought, something to mull over from these sources. Isn't it deeply ironic? You have these two absolutely catastrophic events, a brutal century-long war causing immense bloodshed and upheaval, and a horrifying plague that wiped out maybe half the population. Just unimaginable suffering.
Truly devastating times.
And yet, these very disasters seem to have been the unintentional crucibles that forged modern English, that pushed it back to prominence. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how often profound cultural or linguistic shifts emerge from periods of intense conflict or suffering.
It's a powerful and somewhat unsettling thought that creation and destruction can be so closely linked in history.
It really is. Well, thank you for sending in the sources that let us explore this incredible story, the comeback of English. We've traced how it was sidelined after the Norman Conquest.
Pushed to the margins.
Then how the Hundred Years' War fueled a sense of English identity and made French unpopular.
The patriotic angle.
While the Black Death created this huge social disruption that grimly opened the door for English speakers and their language to rise.
A combination of factors creating that crucial turning point.
But as you said, the English that emerged was Middle English, changed, enriched, but maybe not yet, settled, standardized.
Exactly. It was vibrant, it was expanding, but it wasn't uniform across the country. Different regions spoke and wrote it differently. The story isn't over yet.
Right. How did this energized but varied Middle English become the more standardized language we recognize? Who were the key players after the plague and the wars in shaping it?
That's the next chapter, really. The process of standardization.
And that's exactly what we'll be diving into next time. So make sure you join us for Who Shaped English After the Black Death. You won't want to miss it.
Looking forward to it.
See you then.